Hey, welcome to Military Matters here in Nevada. This is Major Ricky Harold, retired. The Colonel's not here today. He's out in Houston with his family. But remember, this show is about veterans, for veterans, and everything regarding veterans. We'd like to be insightful, factual, and thought-provoking when we do this show. And we want to talk about issues that are a major concern to our veterans families, and those individuals who support the military. Today, because this is a one-pony show, we don't have an actual guest today, I wanted to talk about current affairs as far as the veterans are concerned. We have the VA, and it's one of the 13 appropriations bills that's coming up that's due no later than the 30th of September. And one of the issues for our veterans is what kind of funding and what current funding and what future funding is going to be available to our veterans, for our veterans, to help our veterans. Some of the things that have come up in the process. Now, you got to remember, there's a whole program of how funding gets done. And just to remind our listeners out there, one of the big things is first of all, both the House and the Senate have to mark up a bill. And they have sponsors, usually from both the parties, the Republican and Democratic parties, both sign on to the veterans bill. Then they have to debate what they're going to have in the bill and how much money of the budget is going to be available. Sounds like a lot of gobbledygook, but it's very time consuming and it's very important because it's how our veterans get their programs funded. So what's happened so far, and today is 28th of August, so we're rounding out the end of August. We got 30 days left to the end of the fiscal year, 1 October to 30 September. So fiscal year 25 is ending and fiscal year 26 is starting. So let's just say, for argument's sake, we're dealing with fiscal year 26. That's in 30 some days. So the House has already passed their bill. The Senate has passed 0 bills. No bills have passed through the Senate at all, because all the Democrats have done is hold back the Republicans from working on any major funding issues because they're strong-arming the Republicans on nominations for the president's cabinet and all of the positions. There's something like 4,000 positions that have to be approved by the Senate. And they're making the Republicans in the Senate do a one-on-one vote with 24 to 48 hours per vote. Well, you can imagine that could be the whole 4 years and never even get through all 4,000 of them. So one of the things that the leader of the Senate is going to have to do is he's going to have to tell the Democrats that they're either going to show up and they're going to stay 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the whole month of September to start doing the federal budget. And if they don't show up, then they're going to vote without their presence. They only need 51 votes to pass anything. But if the Democrats object and they filibuster, then they have to get 60 votes to override the filibuster. That's an arduous process too, but there's ways around that can be done. But the important thing for our veterans out there is that so far, I can't really tell you what the Senate version of the Veterans Administration bill is going to be because they don't know what it is. And that's a really sad state of affairs when the government is down to the last 30 days and they don't even know what their budget's going to be and they don't even know what's in the bill. We know some of the stuff that's been generally agreed because they have a conference at the beginning of the new calendar year. The Republicans have a conference with the House members and the Senate members, and they come up with a general idea of how they're going to spend money on each of these appropriation bills. So it's not like nobody knows what's going to happen. It's just they don't know all the details of how it's going to happen. And what's going on today is that the House has passed a version. It almost never gets approved by the Senate. They end up having their own version, and then they have to have a conference and come back and hash that out. And it's usually an 80-20 deal. So either the House or the Senate gets 80% of what they want and the other side gets 20. That's just politics, and that's just how it works. For our veterans out there, the amount of money you're going to get for your disability payments, we're not going to know what that is until the NDA gets approved, the National Defense Act gets approved, because whatever the military gets, that usually the same thing goes for the Veterans Administration disability payments, as goes for Social Security. Now, certain years, the NDA is much higher for your active duty military than it is for your retirees and for your Social Security recipients and for your VA benefits. But they're always within the realm of plus or minus 1 or 2 percentage points. So sometimes if the NDA says there's going to be a 5% increase, you can pretty much count that the Social Security, your benefits package for the VA benefits, disability payments, as well as your military retiree payments is going to be maybe 2.5% or 3%. This year, because inflation officially is 2.7%, I can guarantee you that we're not going to get 2.7%. What we're going to get maybe 2% or 1.5% is probably a realistic number that I expect that we're going to get. But we'll get some kind of increase. You got to remember, under the Obama years, now I'm going back 10 years ago, but under the Obama years, you know how much cost of living we got under the Obama years? 0. For 8 years. We got no cost of living for 8 years.
It says it's going to be 3.2
for the
cost of living allowance in 2025.
Well, this is 2026. That was last year.
Oh, that's true.
That was last year.
That's true.
But it's going to be much lower this year.
Gotcha.
Well, not significantly lower, but it'll be, I suspect, less than 2%. But if it's more than that, I will be ecstatic, to be honest with our listeners, that's a much better prognosis. I don't foresee that happening, but I could be wrong. But let's just talk to our listeners out there. So the cost of living is a benefit that the military and the veterans and your Social Security recipients gets, because all it's trying to do is keep up with inflation. We all know that it never does, but at least it's some attempt to do so. So your fixed income, you're going to get a little bit more, even though the cost of living is going to be, when the government says it's 2.7% inflation, we all know that the actual inflation, that you go out there and buy gasoline, you buy food, you pay your rent, it all goes up by 5, 8, or 10%. So in reality, you've got to earn some extra money just to stay even, or have some other form of income producing abilities. Because if you're just on one fixed income, you're a one-trick pony, and you're in deep, deep trouble, because you're never going to have the same purchasing power from year after year after year. So this is why people in their 60s and 70s, and sometimes even older than that, are working as Walmart greeters and working in grocery stores and working sweeping streets and stuff like that, because they have to supplement the little bit of income that they got from the government to offset, just so they can pay their minimum bills. And this is a sad state of affairs. Most of our veterans out there have squirreled away enough money so that they have some ability to get through the hard times. But if you're living on a fixed income, paycheck to paycheck, you're in a bad way, folks. You really are. But let me tell you some good news. So let's just say you're on a fixed income and you only got X amount of dollars, whatever that is. Do you realize that you can go to the VA hospital and they have a food bank there, and you can get all kinds of quality food? It costs you nothing. So that's another way to supplement your ability to pay the cost of living. I mean, I think it's sad that we have to have food banks for Americans, but it's a reality of life. And don't feel ashamed, or don't feel like you're burdening somebody else if you take supplemental food for your families. My gosh, you earn that. You know, when you get your VA benefits, it's not because the government says, "Hey, we're getting a handout." You earn those benefits. It's like people when it talks about Social Security, that you put that money aside. The government took your money for 40 years, and now they're giving you something back when you're 62 or 66 or 68, whatever your eligibility date is. That money is the money that the government held in abeyance. They took that money from you. They took that money from your employer and set it aside in theory, and that money is now being doled out to you. But in reality, you know, I don't want to bust a lot of people's bubble, but it's a Ponzi scheme. What that means is that the people who are paying into it today that money's being shoveled out for the people that are receiving the money currently. And why is that? Because it's a pay-as-you-go system. People paid in it for 40 years. They expect to receive something out. But the money that they put in has already been spent. It's the people who are currently working that are paying for the people that are receiving the benefits. And this is why you always hear, well, in so many years, you're going to go broke. Well, the government never goes broke. It just figures out another way to shovel money out of your pocket into somebody else's pocket. And one of the reasons that actually happens is because your politicians out there that you vote for create programs that are not funded. Well, where does that money go to or come from to pay for these whatever pet projects? I'll give you a perfect example. We have a boondoggle in California called the fast rail system. You know, the bullet train to nowhere. Well, this bullet train was originally developed for, and the only reason I'm bringing it up to our veterans is because that's the money that belongs to you that's not going to you, is that they said in 2007 that they were going to build a bullet train from Los Angeles to San Francisco and was going to cost $33 billion, and it would be completed no later than 2020.
Now it's going from Bakersfield to Merced.
That's correct. But it's even worse than that. They're not even going to lay track. They haven't laid any track at all. Not 1 foot of track has been laid, all right? But they say that they'll actually have some, you know, a few miles ready for people to go from Bakersfield to the outskirts of Bakersfield maybe in 2030, and maybe to Merced by 2033, but now they're talking 2036. So it's a bullet train to nowhere. But they're now saying that $33 billion that may be operational sometime a decade from now is going to cost $128 billion. Where are they going to get the money? Well, they got a bond issue and they got money from Californians. They all ponied up a bunch of this money. So far, they've ponied up something like $20 billion of this money. Well, the federal government was going to kick in $3 to $4 billion, and Sean Duffy, the transportation secretary, said, "We're not going to give you this money because you can't do what you said you're going to do. The contracts that you signed are invalid. The government obligations that the state of California and the contractors gave to the federal government on signed contractual affidavits, they're all null and void. They've all expired, and now they want more money." Not just the $4 billion they've asked for to start with, which they've already taken a couple billion of that, but Sean Duffy's pulled the last couple billion back because he says that's just throwing good money down a rat hole.
Yeah, here's the current situation of California's high-speed rail project. So the initial investment approved was $45 billion. Now it's over $90 billion with significant delays in construction, and the Federal Railroad Administration's recent cancellation of billions in funding and criticism that the project has no viable path forward.
Yes, because there's it's what it is folks, what you have to understand, it's a boondoggle for the contractors, it's a boondoggle for the unions, it's a boondoggle for the politicians. All that money's lying in their pockets. They're not producing anything. All they're doing, you know what? You have John Q. Public out there. He has 2 acres on the line that's going from Bakersfield to Merced. Well, he knows they got the land rights for his 2 acres. His 2 acres is in alfalfa and hay. But he says, well, if I was to sell that to my farmers next door, I might get $3,000 to $4,000 an acre. But if I sell it to these idiots in the state of California, I can get $50,000 an acre, and they'll pay him $50,000. They don't even argue the market price. They just say, okay, I'll pay you $50,000. So there's $100,000 for 2 acres, right?
Yeah, you're talking about other key issues. You already mentioned there's a lack of actual track installation. And secondly, there are disputes over land acquisition due to eminent domain, associated litigation.
Oh, well, it's a
questionable ridership, projections, just all kinds of stuff, potential impacts on agriculture. It's Cali.
Well, my question for anybody who's listening is, who's the riders? Who is going to ride from Bakersfield to Merced? Unless you're an agricultural guy, and oh, by the way, this is a high-speed rail, right? So you're not carrying a luggage with you. You're not carrying cattle and sheep and goats and stuff, right? So it's just for passengers.
And what's crazy, they have this in China.
Oh yeah, they have it in Japan.
200 miles an hour or something like that.
Yeah, 220 miles an hour. I've been on one. I was in the one on Beijing. I actually got on the bullet train.
Pretty damn safe.
Yeah. I mean, you went from one city to another and you were done in about 12 minutes. Yeah. But once again, even in China, it doesn't go from like Shanghai, which is the coastal city, to Beijing. You know why? Because even in communist China, it costs too frickin' much money to build a high-speed rail from one major city to another. It's cost prohibitive for the communists, if you can believe it or not. It's more money than all they did was build a show one from one city to another. I think it goes from Shanghai to Chengdu. So I think that's what it's pronounced.
Pretty good.
And that's about as far as it goes, But it's a showpiece. Now the one in Europe actually goes from Paris to Orléans. It actually goes from one city to another, one major city to another major city. So you actually have a high-speed rail that actually has passengers who want to go on. But the one that they're building in California that you veterans out there are paying for, and they're taking your veterans' funds to fund this stuff, it's not working. But that's just one aspect of how your federal dollars are being spent. I mean, I could get into other funding. I mean, heck, we're talking about the Environmental Protection Agency. That used to be there for clean water and clean soil and for clean air, right? That was its primary responsibility. And then the Department of Energy with the EPA worked out abatement for what we called hotspots, which were areas that were spoiled by heavy metals and things like that. And the Department of Energy, especially for radioactive stuff that had to do with nuclear power plants and nuclear reactors and stuff like that. Well, that's all well, and that's what the initial purpose of these organizations were. Well, now, where billions of the dollars that go to the EPA and the DOE go for? Environmental security, safety, and environmental social programs, which is a nice way to say that lawyers get paid a lot of money to do nothing but say climate change 100 years from now is going to destroy this area. I've been on this planet for 71 years, and I remember going to school in university, and they were saying that the same people, just changed different titles, but the same people who were propagandizing, they're saying that the planet was in a dire strait with climate. They call it climate. It was not climate change. It was.
It started with that guy that invented the internet. What is his name? Gore or something.
Yeah, Al
like
Gore. Yeah, but they were literally saying that by the year 2000, the planet would be despoiled, and by the year 2025, which I think that's now.
Yeah.
Okay. That we would be in a frozen wasteland. It would be an ice age. It would be basically you couldn't grow any crops or anything because the soil would be despoiled and we'd be in a dystopian, cold, frigid climate. And then here's the remarkable thing. After 2000 and their projections went haywire, people like AOC said that by 2025, we would be boiling. The rivers would boil, the oceans would dry up, and we would all die by 2025. She literally said that. You can go look it up.
Yeah, every century has its doomsayers, though, right?
Yeah. Well, it's the Chicken Little theory of life. The sky is falling. The sky is falling. Yeah. And if and there's always these kind of sirens out there. Then if you want to fantasize and believe this crap, you're entitled to do that. But don't use my hard-earned tax dollars to do that with. And this is what they're doing. They're taking our funded money that it's supposed to go help veterans so that they're not starving on the streets and homeless, that they have a comfortable lifestyle, not rich and famous, but you got 3 squares of meals a day, you're living in a comfortable house, and you're not freezing to death. That's all we're asking for, right? They don't even want you to have that. They want to take it for their boondoggles. They want to take it for the bullet train to nowhere. They want to take it for environmental justice. They want to take, you know what the name environmental justice means? Give money to lawyers. That's all it means. And by the way, they want not a little bit of money, they want a lot of money.
Yeah, somebody told me one time, it was a pretty good analogy, that, why getting involved with government, working for government, politicians, everybody that's in that spectrum, said, imagine that the U.S. Treasury, all the money that flows through the U.S. Treasury, through the taxpayers and things like that, is like, imagine it like a big pipe or a conduit. And all these parasites along the way, some of them kind of tap into it, like a miner, and then they get little drips coming out of the U.S. Treasury. And then some people have spigots where they can just turn on the valve a little bit, adjust the volume and stuff like that. So I always thought that it's kind of like what you're talking about, that you're skimming. All over the place.
Oh yeah, it's the mother lode of if you want it, it's better than a gold mine, okay? Because it never, you gold mine, you eventually tap out, right? Well, with the federal government, it never taps out.
Well, more specifically, the Federal Reserve.
Well, yeah, but you know what I find amazing?
There's the Ponzi scheme.
I'll tell you what's really, you're right about that, but I want to talk about the Treasury, which is interesting. And I found out about that here in February. The Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, you hear about these guys all the time and big balls and all this other BS stories. Well, they were looking at payments and payment accountability for receiving federal money from the Treasury. And I worked for the federal government for many years in the Bureau and in the Department of Defense, and we were accountable. If I needed a voucher and I needed $1,000, I had to get an approval. I had a voucher, and then I'd have to go to the accounting office, and they would have to write me a check, or they would give me a credit card or something like that, and I could spend $1,000. Then I'd have to have receipts for everything, right? It's called documentation.
Yeah.
Right. Do you realize that when a government agency, say like the Department of Energy or the Health and Human Services or something like that, when they want money from the Treasury, they just send
an invoice?
They say no. They send an email from their department.
Request for funds.
And I request $5 billion. Don't say right. What it's for, why, $5 billion. And you know what the Treasury does?
It just sends it.
Sends $5 billion, no questions asked.
Once you get certain clearance.
No, it's not even a clearance.
Well, you can't just send that to anybody, right?
Well, as long as it's coming from the agency.
Yes.
So, in other words, you could be a low-level accountant, or you could be the secretary of the agency, or you could be John Q. Nobody pushing a broom. You could get on the computer and ask for money, and they'd send it to you. That's nuts.
That's more than nuts.
No, but that's absolutely true. The DOGE found that out. So in other words, it's all based upon trust and honesty. And we all know that not everybody in the government is trustworthy, or honest, right? So when the Department of Defense has an audit, can't pass an audit, and when they're saying that the discrepancy between what they know, what they have, and what they're supposedly was spent is off by $500 billion. It's $500 billion. That's a big OMG. I mean, seriously, they can't account for $500 billion.
And like, not to throw again military under the bus, but like the famous Rumsfeld, wasn't that $3 trillion on November 10th, right before 9/11?
Well,
and then of course that crashed into the Pentagon, and it just seems to like have been lost into the ethos.
Well,
nobody's chasing that money. That's $3 trillion.
Yeah, here, folks, you can't even imagine how much money $1 trillion is. But let me just give you something that you can grasp a hold of. You could take $100 bills, put it on the ground wherever you're sitting, stack it, go all the way to Saturn and back twice, $100 bills, and that would be $1 trillion.
Right?
Saturn.
1,000 million is a billion. 1,000 billion is a trillion.
Yeah. It's an inconceivable.
You can't spend that money.
No, but your brain can't even grasp that amount. By the way, there's you know what 1,000 trillion is? A jillion.
There's a jillion with a J.
That's a real number, by the way. A jillion. Yeah. These are incredible.
That sounds like Rodney Dangerfield made that up.
I can't get no respect, but I can spend your money.
A jillion.
A jillion, yeah, it's 1,000 trillion. Yeah, these are. There was a famous politician back in the 80s, and he was from Illinois, and he was a congressman. I can't think of his name right this minute, but it doesn't matter. He's dead. But he said, one thing about the government and spending money, $1 billion here, $1 billion there. Eventually, you start talking about some real money. This was in the 80s. They're talking billions of dollars. That we have a, what's her name? She just got engaged.
Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift. Thank you very much. Taylor Swift got engaged to the football player, and he's actually a pretty good guy. But my point is, she's worth $1 billion. She's a singer, and she's talented, but it's $1 billion. Her net asset value is $1 billion. We have a congresswoman currently in the House of Representatives. She used to be the speaker. Her name is Nancy Pelosi. This is no joke. She went into office in the late 1980s. I think it was 88 or 89, something like that. She became a congresswoman for the first time, and she's still the congresswoman from San Francisco to this day. Her husband, Paulie, who, by the way, went to federal prison for graft and corruption, spent a couple of years in a pokey. But her and her husband's whole net worth when she went into Congress was $1.5 million. That's a lot of money. Even back then, that was a lot of money, $1.5 million. And she gets a salary of no more than $200,000 a year. So if you did 30 years... I think
it was like 74. I think that's what her annual salary was.
Yeah, $174,000. Yeah, but I'm just rounding it up to $200,000.
Yeah.
So you round it up to $200,000, and you multiply that by 30 years, right? You get about $12 million, something like that, total amount. I may be off a few million, but you know what her net worth is?
It's like, I think 700 million.
$400 million.
400 million, yeah.
So she's got a set salary, assuming that she spent something to pay for her bills, right? 400. How do you make $400 million while you're in Congress making $176,000 a year?
Right.
Well, the only way I don't even know robbers who rob banks or big heists make $400 million. So this is just one congressperson in the U.S. House of Representatives. Can you imagine the other 435? What they're doing? And I'm pretty sure that they're not as endowed as she is, but they all got they literally all have their noses in the government trough.
Step right up for insider trading.
That's right. Because it's not illegal. It's immoral and it's unethical, but it's not illegal. And every time the Congress puts it up to pass a bill to make it illegal, it never gets enough votes.
I thought there was one time where it was illegal for a very short period of time, but they didn't enforce it. And then
that's the other thing. You can, when we talk about funding programs, they always talk about the funding, but it doesn't matter if you pass a bill, if you don't. It's not even if you fund a bill, it's if you spend the money of the funded bill. This is the part that the federal government is great about. They pass bills. They have great programs for the VA, for our veterans and stuff like that. But what's the two things that they don't do after they fund a bill? One, they don't tell anybody about it. And two, so they don't advertise it. I advertise it every time I can on the radio station so our people actually know. But they don't tell them that these programs are available. And the other thing the government doesn't do is tell you what the restrictions on the availability to be eligible for the programs, because there are a lot of strict requirements to be eligible. So out of every 100 veterans receiving VA benefits, there's always some strings attached. So the average veteran who might be eligible for $100 might actually get maybe $35. So what happens to the rest of the money? You know what? Nobody knows. And I can honestly tell you that, look you in the face and say, they don't know. So how, if the people who are in charge of the money don't know, how do you think I know? Because I can tell you I don't. Miraculously, the money disappears. It just siphons away. Like you were talking about that big stream where they have little bits and pieces come off, and then there's whole spigots.
Little drips, and some of them have spigots.
Some of them have big hoses. But this is what happens to our money. This is the people's money that is being just frivolously thrown away for purposes. And if you get caught lying in your pocket, you end up in an orange jumpsuit. You and I end up in an orange jumpsuit. If you're a politician, they give you a slap on the hand and say, please don't do that again. And if you do, don't tell us about it. So that's kind of the reality of how the government spends our money.
It's kind of like Carlin. I always quote Carlin.
George Carlin?
Yeah. It's a big club, and you ain't in it.
And you're never going to
be. Are not in the big club.
And you're never going to be invited to the.
So a question. So when you're talking about the bill earlier, were you referring to the Veterans Access Act? Is that the name of the bill? That's
one of the bills that's coming up.
That's one of them. Okay.
Yeah, it's just one of the many bills that has been marked up by the House, but nothing's been then marked up.
Yeah, it's saying it may come up for a vote late in 2025. Mm-hmm. But it also mentions some of the stuff that's interesting, that some of the challenges in this particular bill that pushes for more community care options, because speak on this or what you know. So it says that the VA is spending much more on private care. It's grown rapidly. Instead of it being one entity as the VA hospital, now they're spending, they're saying it's increasing rapidly.
Well, that's because the Trump administration as during the first Trump administration, mm-hmm. they had a program that said if the VA does not meet your medical or mental issues within a couple weeks, 2 weeks to 30-day period window, that you need access to medical care or mental health, that you have the right to go to health care.
So it's like a safety net.
Yes.
Because they weren't the VA that was, of course, known for big, long lines, right?
Well, because they don't have enough staff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so they couldn't meet the requirement. It's like, endocrinologist. I have one for myself, and I can tell you anecdotally that if I miss an appointment, I don't get another one for 3 to 6 months. Well, if you're having an endocrinologist, that means you could have diabetes, or you could have liver disease, or you could have all kinds of organ issues, and they're supposed to track it on a 30 to 60 to 90 day period. But if the doctor's out and they cancel your appointment, you don't get an appointment next week. You get one 2 or 3 months later.
Yeah, so that's actually good thing then that they're
Yes.
able to tap into the private sector. It also notes that under the mental health care access that there's a significant percentage of veterans from the Iraq and Afghanistan experience who suffer from PTSD or other sorts of major depression, and the challenges in providing mental health care are going to include ensuring an adequate supply of providers, speaking to your point, and connecting veterans with the right care at the right time. So that's another good positive, I guess, in this particular act.
One of the things that one of the reasons the VA is underfunded isn't because the VA isn't doing the best job it can. The doctors and nurses and medical practitioners are doing an outstanding job all through the country. I mean, there's always a few exceptions, but generally speaking, they're all doing a very due diligent job. The problem that you run into is that the VA is an organization that was built and funded in the 1920s, 100 years ago. And life expectancy 100 years ago was, people were in the 40s and 50s were dying. So if you were a soldier and you were 18 years old, and then you had they called it shell shock, or you had battle fatigue or anxiety or whatever, you were referred to a medical doctor who wasn't even a psychiatrist. They were just a medical doctor. And they'd see, if you had blurry vision or whatever the case was from a medical evaluation, but your life expectancy was only another 15 or 20 years. So even if you were getting really top-notch VA medical assistance, you were dead by the time you were 45 or 50 years old. You were in the ground. Yeah. They got you a marker and a veteran cemetery, and that's where you were at. Now today, you have guys who are 18, 20 years old. They might live to 90 or 100 years old. So they've got there's exponentially, and this is what nobody even this is the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about. People are living longer.
Right.
People's ailments get worse as you get older. I mean, nobody gets off this planet alive, but you certainly want to live at least a halfway decent life while you're still alive, and you're not, in a bedridden in a VA hospital. But what's the problem is that people who aren't being seen by doctors within the first couple of years of getting out of the service, these medical conditions, be it mental or physical or whatever, only manifest and get worse. They don't get better. They potentially get way worse. And the harder that you wait and the longer that you wait, then the more medical conditions and issues you're going to have. And a lot of it may or may not be eligible for the VA to qualify for, because it could be existential, but it could be the fact that because you're living longer and you may not eat right or you may not live a good lifestyle, those issues are also part of your life, and therefore your medical condition is respondent. Yeah, you could have had problems with your leg or your arm or something that was a military injury. It has nothing to do with your eyeballs, to do with your knees and your joints, but those are going out too. So now you've got multiple medical issues that have nothing to do with it, service connected, but you're looking for the VA to help you out. And the VA will try to help you out in whatever it can, but it's overstretched and overworked, and they can't meet the life expectancy or the amount of men and women who need medical help. And let's remember, the VA medical system is a socialist system. It's a government-provided social medical care is what it is.
Good point.
When people talk about, you want socialized medicine, the VA is socialized medicine. And they do the best they can, but they're underfunded.
So, Ricky, like the VA recently announced, what do you think for some homelessness veterans that are out there? They announced an initiative. How much money in grants do you think is going to be available in 2026?
I don't think they even know.
They do. Well, it has like $818 million in grants to combat the veteran homelessness during the 2026 fiscal year.
Well, that's a drop in the bucket. You know, they don't even know how many homeless veterans there are because nobody goes out and actually does an evaluation.
That's what I was going to say, but there's no following the money. They don't want people to follow the money, I don't think.
If you look at the state of California, the current governor, Newsom, ran on the fact that if you elect him 8 years ago, that he was going to eliminate homelessness in California.
Well, that's what he ran on.
And he's in the last 8 years, they've spent over $25 billion on homelessness in California, and there's more homeless today than there was 8 years ago.
Yep.
So where did the $25 billion go?
California may love him, but he's not going to do well in the general. There's just too much video proof of his history.
Well, the guy's all talk and no hat.
Yeah.
I mean, he literally is the definition of, I will give you all, I want to tell you everything you want to hear, and everything I want to tell you is free. And then the reality is, I'm not going to do nothing for you, but the money that you do give me, I'm going to squander it for me and my cohorts and my buddies and the people who support me to be elected. That's where the money's going to go. If you actually follow the money that the politicians make in California, well, it doesn't even matter. California could be here in Nevada too, for that matter. But if you follow the money that the politicians actually receive and spend, it all goes back to all of their friends, their cohorts, their sponsors. You know, it's like here in Nevada, you'll have 20 or 30 casino owners and rich ranchers. Well, guess where all the money goes? It goes to support the casinos and the rich ranchers.
Yeah, you know, all their donors, of course, you can write it off as a donation, stuff like that, but they expect to get that money back somehow.
Oh, expect to get 10 times that back.
Yeah.
And if they don't, they kick you out and get somebody else who'll give them 10 times that much.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how it works.
That's how it works.
I mean, let's give you a perfect example. You can have a wetlands where the state of Nevada and the federal government says this is for waterfowl and for drainage strictly. That's all it is. 5-10 years later, you know what they're doing? They're building houses on the wetlands. Who gave them the variances? Where did they get the authorizations for the exemptions to build in a wetlands area?
Yeah.
You know what the answer is? Nobody knows. But all of a sudden, there's a housing development in the wetlands.
Well, it's kind of like on the History Channel too. You know how the country was built. You know, so back in the 1900s and stuff like that. You have again all these backroom deals. That's not going to change. It's never going to change. And back to Carlin, you know, they own all the the best land.
Oh yeah.
So I kind of like when people Gavin Newsom.
Have you ever seen a movie called Hell on Wheels?
Oh yeah, that's familiar. It's been a long time.
Well, it was back 10 years ago. But Hell on Wheels was how they built the Intercontinental Railroad in the 1860s, from after the Civil War to where the Promontory Ridge, where they came together. The Union Pacific and the Central Pacific came together in Promontory, Utah, and they had the last spike it was 1869.
I did not see that though.
That was all on government money. It was all paid for by government money. It was all government land.
Yeah, kind of like bailing out the banks in 2008. With all the foreclosure stuff.
Well, here's the good part. Yeah. If the railroads, wherever they put the track, the rail track was, this is real. This is history. Wherever they put the track, 200 miles on either side of the track belonged to the railroad. 200 miles on either side of the railroad belonged to the railroad. So what the railroad did was say, hey, they literally created towns and cities and said, we'll sell you the land cheap. It wasn't even their land. It was the government's land, but they were now given title to the land.
So especially in the Central Valley, of course, you got the Union Pacific that goes right through Highway 99.
Sure.
That separates the entire valley right there. So you're saying that same type of thing, so you have all these farmland that need their little areas for the commodities to be taken off the carts.
Yeah.
And so that would be an easy way to do that. I don't know. Now you're making me want to watch that.
It was an interesting way to watch how the robber barons made money.
Yeah, but Gavin, I mean, they're gonna put the lipstick on the pig, but their approval rating right now, I just don't see how are they going to recover, and they just continue to make
Double
things
down.
worse, yes, for themselves. So I don't really foresee very much success from that.
Well, I watched Gavin Newsom today, actually, and he was on some podcast with some guy, and he had a mental meltdown.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, on TV, on the podcast, he had a mental meltdown. His biggest concern was keeps getting some conservative action groups sending him red hats that say Trump 2028.
Yeah.
Well, they're just trolling him.
Yeah, they're trolling.
They're just trolling him. I just laugh and give him away, hawk him away or whatever the case. He actually thinks it's real. He thinks that the president is going to run for a third term. Free space in his head. Trump is just sitting there renting his head space for free.
For sure.
Then he said something about how the old trope that he's a dictator and all this other kind of stuff. But he was going off on how the federal government doesn't have the right to have eminent domain. The federal government doesn't have the right to protect federal property.
This is his first rodeo.
I mean, even children in the 8th grade know that, the federal government has the right to protect its property, but he doesn't think that's constitutional. I could guarantee you he has never read the Constitution, let alone know what's in the Constitution at all. And then, of course, it comes down to interpretation. I mean,
right.
You have the amendments to the Constitution. One of them is obviously the 14th Amendment, which has to do with expanded rights for enslaved peoples so that they were given the right to vote and given the right to representation and taking states' ability to, states could no longer deny people their civil rights. Basically, the 14th Amendment said whatever up until after the Civil War, the Constitution of the United States was based upon the federalism. The federal government had enumerated powers which are very specific, and states have plenary power, which means they have unlimited within their jurisdictions. Well, what the 14th Amendment did was it said certain federal rights are now national rights, and states can't take those away from you. And so he thinks because the state of California has California rights, that they supersede the federal rights.
He's state law.
It's supremacy. It's supremacy clause of the Constitution.
He's
and he literally was melting down. He had no clue that there's such thing as either he's clueless or he really thinks that everybody is morons.
He's really good at hyperbole. And then when somebody confronts him on something that he did wrong, he's just like, we're not here to talk about that today.
Yeah, let's just move on for a different.
There's no ownership. There's no accountability.
Or my favorite one, it's old news.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. We're moving on.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're moving on.
But if it's something that a Republican did 30, 40 years ago when they were in high school, oh my God, this person needs to be nailed to the cross because he did something I believe that was mean and nasty, and now we need to hold him accountable.
That's crazy. Somebody told me this a long time ago too, and it always helps me in my emotional management when it comes to politics. It's just like,
don't take them seriously.
Kind of like that, but first is to realize that, kind of like, I can't remember what it was. I think 90s, 80s, to be born in the United States, if you were born in the United States, you
won the lottery.
1 out of 23. So that's like, if you don't know how hard that is, put, black marble and 22 white marbles, and then put them in a bag and see how many times it takes you to find that black marble. So 1 out of 23 chance. So it's the greatest country in the world. We have a sordid history, for sure. There's some things that the government, all governments over mankind's history, has not been the kindest to the people.
Oh, no. Think about it. We've only been a country for coming up for 250 years, right? 250 years, right? That's a drop in the bucket for countries in Europe.
Absolutely.
I mean, their country's been around for thousands of years, right? Just think, if the Europeans talk about their heritage and their lineage and their tribalism and their history and all this kind of stuff, Do you think that they go back 500 years or 1,000 years and say, you know, my greatest ancestor from a millennium ago, he had a slave, and you know, therefore today I'm responsible for people that came from another continent who's now in my country.
Yeah.
I'm responsible to take care of them because 1,000 years ago, one of these.
And that's the whole thing.
They just think that that would never even cross their brain that would be something that's acceptable.
Well, you're talking, for example, when people say you're on stolen land, it's just like, okay, wait, like this, you know, the world's different now, but it was conquered long ago. So let's get over that.
Wait a minute, they stole him from the saber-toothed tiger. Where's his rights?
Yeah, how far you want to go back? But you know, here's something that somebody told me. It's just like it or not, you know, this entire planet and all of the kings and the different forms of government, you know, that are out there, we all, except for some isolated places, we all live on a big, giant tax farm, right? We have to, you know, food, shelter, clothing.
Right.
You know, there's a monetary, you know, thing and so when you look at that, that's kind of right. You know what I mean? Because we get a social security number, we grow up, they give us the mom and dad tax write-offs while they're raising us. But we're 18, they started giving us a piece, kind of like a mob, you know, saying, you know, hey, we want our cut. You know, you're here, you're in a great country, you got the opportunity to go out and make a lot of money, but it's like, you know, just like the mob.
Give us our piece.
We want our piece, right?
Yeah.
And so once you understand that, that's a key part right there.
Well, you know, I was telling my wife, just a perfect example of that. I'm sorry to interrupt, but perfect example of that was I had some NVIDIA stock, and it was getting ready to have its shares evaluation because it was the next quarter coming up, right? And it looked a little dubious. So I said to my wife, I said, you know, I'm gonna sell my NVIDIA stock. I might buy it back later, and sure as life, after it came out, the stock went down. Not a lot, a couple of dollars a share, but it went down. And I was telling my wife how much I got, how much I made, which was a good chunk of money. And I said, just remember though, 21% of that goes to the federal government.
Yeah.
That just straight off the top, because it's stock.
It's for security, you know.
And
Guido's going to be buying the 5th. No, let's make it April 15th. Guido's going to come by on the 15th.
That's right. Guido's coming by on the 15th, and he's got a big stick in case you can't answer the door.
Yeah.
But you know, so I told her, how much they were going to get that much. I said, well, yeah, that's what 21% is, you know. And she says, oh yeah.
Yeah, unless you can write it off somehow, you know, like, you know, to, you know, diminish your tax exposure.
Right. I mean, whatever write-offs.
But once you learn that you're on this tax farm, right? Then they went on to explain. Now, just like on every farm, no matter what the livestock is, sheep, cows, you know, whatever it is, there's always a sheepdog.
Right.
Right. There's
a herder.
A herder. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know. And, oh yeah. So what is? Well, that's politicians and media, you know, which is other tools, you know, for the owners.
Right.
And think of it like whenever you see something on TV, you know, election, debate, you know, some talking head on a news show or something like that, you know, think of that like a corporate bulletin board. The owners of a corporation do not put anything on the employee bulletin board that they don't want them to know. They don't tell them about everything that happens in the board meetings before.
Well, they don't want them to know.
That's what I'm saying. You know, so when they told me that, just like, God, you know, I wrap my head around that. And so when I watch a lot of these things, as silly as it may sound, it's almost like watching an episode of the Hunger Games, you know, where Woody Harrelson's out there.
Well, you know,
speaking about a bullet train.
Well, you know, there was a book called 1984.
Yes. Fantastic.
Fantastic book.
It's here.
We're living 1984.
Yeah.
But you know, the book that's even more relevant to today than even 1984, Animal Farm.
Animal Farm.
Do you remember it?
My gosh, I know I've seen that. Animal Farms.
Animal Farm is the one about how communism works.
Okay.
You know, it's talking about the pigs and the horses and the pecking order of who gets to tell people what.
When was this made?
In 1930s.
Okay, so
in 1930s, it's called Animal Farm. Read it.
Okay.
And each animal has a specific job.
Right.
You know, like like you were talking about, the dogs are the enforcers. Mm-hmm. Okay, and you have the horses, which are the workers. Okay. The cattle, which are the feeders. I mean, each animal has a specific job to do. And
Now, is it a book or
Yeah,
was
it's
it
a
made
book.
into a movie?
it was a book. I don't think
Okay,
they
so-
made a movie out of
okay.
it. It's Animal Farm. And
Yeah, and those times, man, they really knew how to lay it out. There's another thing I heard that the Wizard of Oz.
was one of 20 books.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
But it was also a metaphorical, and there's different interpretations of what it could mean.
It was a children's book.
Yeah, I understand. But they're saying that the children's book was still written about, like Emerald City. That's like the American dream, where everybody hears about it and they pursue it and stuff like that.
Oh, well, think about the goat. Remember the Yellow Brick Road?
Uh-huh.
Like Golden
Yeah,
Road
right.
to, the Yellow Brick Road, follow the Yellow Brick Road,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about all of the metaphors,
Well, and that's the thing, is I have this friend, served, the internal affairs, worked, on Trump's security team and stuff like that. So his ancestry is incredible. Like, he's so connected all the way back to like King John. And he keeps track of all of the politicians.
Really?
Yeah. And
That far back?
Movie stars and all that stuff as far as his
a lot of them
family
are
lineage.
genealogically related.
Yeah. So exactly. So he told me that now we're talking about, again, these just ultra rich. I mean, they, again, the ones that run the world. He said that, of course, they sponsor Hollywood, right? And, like when somebody says, hey, I want to make a film, I need some money.
I mean, being greenlit.
Yeah. So they like making movies where they show us and tell us what they do, but it's like weaved into where it's just this entertaining movie, but they're making fun of us. So in The Wizard of Oz, for example, the theory is that the wizard, when it's just like, and Toto's finding them, getting behind don't look behind the curtain because they don't want you to see. But once it's, exposed, then he becomes this glad hander and stuff like that. But the theory goes,
Well, think
that
about Munchkin
he
Land.
represented,
Think of Munchkin Land.
those
You
are
know
all
what
the
that is?
workers.
That's you and us. We're the
Yes,
Munchkins.
That's exactly right. And so they theorized that the Wizard of Oz represented the Federal Reserve, where he was ultimately the man in charge. And he builds this big menagerie, for people to basically waste their time and thinking this is important. And the wicked, they have all these witches. Some of the witches are good, some are bad.
The witch of the north and the east and the west.
So anyway, it's all fascinating stuff. Same thing when you look at the Hunger Games.
Oh, yeah.
So you have a president, you have instead of, cities, counties, you have districts.
Right.
And then,
each
once a
district
year,
supports-
there's a lottery, for somebody to go out and fight for their survival. So each one of these pledges, I think they were called, or something like that, could represent the military that over time have to, pretty consistently have to go battle each other, again, for the entertainment of the people
of the central city.
In this case, it's not really, I guess we're talking about not so much entertainment, but it's feeding the military industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about.
Oh, well, it's not just that. Now it's the health complex, the medical complex, not just medical. One of the things that people don't even think about, and it always drives me crazy because it's so obvious that if you just used a little bit of gray matter, you'd figure it out, is that, who runs our medical complex in the United States?
Well, like Big Pharma you talking
No,
about?
AMA, the American Medical
Okay.
Association.
Yes.
Do you realize they haven't built a new medical hospital for doctors' hospital since the 90s?
Well, it's like
They restrict the amount of doctors that
Yeah.
can be so that they can make more money.
Well, there's more people that go to law school now than go to medical school. And the Western medicine, it also seems like, dealing with it, you're dealing with it. It seems like, again, as an industry, of course, there's some amazing people that are healthcare workers. But, for the most part, they don't want to actually heal you. They just want to kind of keep you sick and feed you medicine and stuff like that.
Well, that's the pharmaceutical companies. It's all about.
That too. Yeah, you're
let's
right.
not cure somebody. Let's just keep them on a low level of medical dependency.
Right. Yeah. And some of the doctors, I'm sure that they probably get some sort of commission or kickback by pushing certain medications, right?
Oh, they do. They don't even hide it. They literally have these people who are medical middlemen or middle women. Most of them are women, by the way.
Kinda like-
And they go into the hospitals literally go into the hospitals, no appointments or anything. They just walk into the doctor's office and say, here's what I got for you today. Like an old elixir salesperson from the 19th.
Snake oil salesman.
Snake oil. So I've got this new, better, brighter aspirin that I can sell you that you get them free right now. However, you give them out to your samples and then we'll start ordering. You don't have to pay for it. The hospital pays for it and you'll get a 5 or 10% kickback. That happens every single day
Yeah, for sure.
on
Yeah,
every
for sure.
single new drug that comes out on the market.
I think that RFK, hopefully he's going to make a big imprint.
Hired the CDC director.
It's like, I think that, again, our food supply, our food supply has gotten so far away that like food should be our medicine, right?
Well,
Like
it used to
food
be.
and not processed food and stuff
Yeah.
like that. I think where
Used to be
everybody's getting
wholesome
fat.
food, yeah.
Speaking of that doctor, yeah, it's like, hey, take this Ozempic right here. You don't even have to exercise anymore. You just take this.
Yeah.
It'll cut down your appetite. You don't even have to go to the gym. And so
Right.
that's what they're pushing, stuff like that. How many commercials with all the side effects? Taking this drug right here, you may, commit suicide or,
What about mutilating children?
that's a side effect that they put out there. Or are you talking about the ideology stuff?
Oh, I'm talking about ideology. Well,
Yeah.
it used to be, say, dysphoria. Was it sexual dysphoria? Was excuse me, was 1/10 of 1% of the population. We're talking a few thousand people out
Right.
of 340 million.
Yeah, exactly.
15 years ago, well, they made a movie. Remember, it was called the Dutchman or whatever it was, about the European guy from Denmark who wanted to become a woman.
I don't think I seen that.
Well, anyway, long story short, right after that, it became real cachet to if you had a child who had dysphoria. So then all the rich people decided they weren't in the in group if one of their children didn't want to change their sex. And then the doctors realized that, hey, I'm averaging maybe $150,000, $200,000 a year income, but if I can cut women's breasts, little girls' breasts off, and cut little boys' penises off, I can make $50,000 to $80,000 an operation. Now I can double my income on one or two patients. So it's a cash machine. It's a cash cow.
Unfortunately,
Mutilating
now,
children became a business.
I think hopefully this is like starting to come out how bad this is now.
It's so bad that Europe is outlawed.
They're the ones. That's why they're the young kids are committing suicide after they do this. Because even the stats are starting to show that. And then I saw a stat today again, like. God bless all these families with this Minneapolis.
Oh, it's so tragic.
Shooter.
We're talking pure evil here.
Yeah, but it's kind of like what was the take that I appreciated somebody said that. Wait a minute. So what you're saying is that somebody that starts out as a male and then gets a surgery and turns into a female. Okay, now we're supposed to call them a woman, but when that happens, and then you have a trans woman that goes and shoots up a school, now all of a sudden you want to refer to them again back as a white male that they started at because they don't want to put it out there that somebody that changed their sex to a woman
Right. They don't
is out there killing kids.
Yeah, that's right. They don't want because they don't want you to find out
Makes
why.
me angry.
Yeah, because the person says, I don't want to be a woman anymore, but I don't have any choice because I've already been sexually mutilated to the point where I can't undo. These are things that can never be undone.
And they're unraveling. All this like illogical stuff is finally, hopefully we can look back just like we look back at COVID and just like, what the F were people thinking back then? And it's like a couple of
mandatory
generations.
taking COVID shots was mandatory. This was experimental. How can you force people to take something experimental?
Well, we're a couple of generations now, from kind of getting rid of some of our mental health programs, they were part of our society. And now with those being gone, I mean, you would see, some of these, people that are not mentally there walking the streets, talking about homelessness and stuff.
Because they got rid of our mental institutions.
That's what I'm saying. There's no outlet, when somebody back in the old days, says, hey, Dad, I know I'm born a boy, but I think I'm really a girl. Back in the day, you'd get a big kind of a slap back of the head. What are you thinking about, man? Like, it just wasn't, and if they kept up, then they would probably refer them to some sort of counseling or something like that. And there's phases that you go through, right?
I grew up, a lot of the little girls I knew, that they would call them, what was it? The normal,
tomboys.
Tomboys.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking of the word. They call them tomboys because they liked the things that boys could do.
Well, we're the coolest gender. That's why. They wanted to be around the
and they wanted to hang with the guys. But they didn't want to become guys. They just wanted to hang out with the guys, and then when their breasts came in and their periods came in and stuff, then they transitioned into being a woman. And this is called, puberty. This is the process by which children become adults through the transition phase of childhood to adulthood. Now they're making it saying that when you're 6 years old, you can decide your own sex. That's insanity.
Yeah, well, you think about since the 60s, right, for example, and look at where we're at now in 2025, the absolute disintegration of the nuclear family.
Oh, it was intentional.
It doesn't matter, of course, statistically different ethnicities, even if, it's even at best 50-50 chance,
Right.
Now back in the day, of course, there's a lot of things from a masochistic standpoint that I think we can admit to back in the 50s or wherever, just like, hey, these are just boys being boys. And even though you were married and somebody had an affair on the side, so that wasn't really fair, to the institution of marriage when those instances were happening. But now with it just being kind of a coin toss, there's no more fixing. There's no working on your marriage. It's just like disposable, 2 years, 5 years, 7 years. You know what I mean? People don't work on their marriage.
Well, now a lot of people, they have at the weddings, people are gambling how long it's going to last.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
this just
Travis Kelce is marrying Taylor Swift. I guarantee you can go to the gambling boards in London right now on how long the marriage will last.
What are you going, 5 years? Over under 10 years. If we put the over under 10 years, would you
I'd
go
say
over?
5.
Yeah.
5 years. I'd give it 5 years.
Yeah. Who knows? I mean, but we're rooting for them.
But she'll get a whole new song out of it because apparently every man or boy that she's ever dated has been a new song.
That's history. That's for sure.
So if you have a history like that, I mean, I truly hope for their sake that they have a long and lasting marriage, but the odds of a billionaire and a wannabe billionaire both making, and his career,
he's gonna make a lot of money in the divorce settlement. I bet maybe a prenuptial.
well, whatever prenups. But here's the thing: he's a football player, right?
Yeah.
You have a shelf life, and
he's about there too.
He's at the end of his shelf life as a football player. This is all reality, but you know how you can tell how bad football is for you physically? You know how long you have to be in the NFL to get a full retirement the rest of your life?
Well, isn't it 7 years or something like that? 5? Okay.
5 years.
Yeah, and the average is 3?
The average is 2 to 3 years.
2 to 3 years, yeah.
Yeah, for the average football player.
Yeah. And when you get that retirement. Well, shoot, man, I kind of sidetracked you there. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
To go down that, just start, sometimes I think it, again, our government can do better.
Well, we are the government. We have to
by the people,
for the people. We as collectively, if we find that the government isn't representing us, we have the ability to throw the bums out and get new bums.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe for a short period of time, the new bums aren't as notoriously bad as the old bums.
My wish list, I guess, would be to what is your take on Ron Paul?
He's an iconoclast because Ron Paul, just like his son, they looked life through rosy-colored glasses, the way we would want it to be, but not the way it really is. And so if you vote in Congress the way you want it to be, you get nothing done. you have to compromise.
Yeah, unfortunately.
I mean, but the Paul family doesn't want to compromise. I mean, the life is black and white. Well, I'm sorry, I was in the Bureau. It ain't black and white. The law may be black and white, but everything you do is shades of gray.
Yeah, and it's always been that way, unfortunately. But the concept of the people being the government, if only the representatives would go there and actually do that. But what happens is that, as we all know, and I can only imagine, I've never been there, but when you get power and influence, that's an intoxicating elixir.
Oh, it's worse than that. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Right.
That's just how it works.
Yeah. I don't know if you've met Adrian, but she came up with this app called Citizenly. And what it basically is the politicians, when they make these campaign promises, whatever their promise is, they get graded on whether they do it or not.
Okay.
Isn't that kind of a cool concept? So you get this kind of this politician report card.
Kind of like when I was in college and we all rated the guys and gals' performance at the end of the weekend.
Exactly. So
2,
based on whether
5,
you
8.
did it or not,
Yeah.
your campaign promises, because like right now, like Trump, right? The dude promised, the border, security, crime, and he's been knocking them down.
Well, here,
He promised Doge. Doge happened. I mean, and what he did to dude.
Well, you touched on something that's very important. I've been voting for president since Nixon. All right, so
my first was Reagan.
over 50 years,
Yeah.
I've been voting for presidents, and I can honestly tell you, the only president I've ever had that's attempted or done everything they said in the campaign is only Donald J. Trump. Is the only person that's ever done that.
Yeah, and so
only
fast.
one out of all of them.
So fast. I mean, it was so impressive because, all these, before the election, he hadn't won yet, but he was putting his best foot forward by having all those internal candidates for the cabinet meetings over at Mar-a-Lago. So he had everything in step by the time. I mean, it's just, you're right. I've never seen anything like this as far as like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And
he does it.
Oh,
Really, the
people
bureaucracy
freaking hate
goes
it.
nuts.
And they're hating it. It's just like, he can't do that. Oh, yeah. I did my homework before this thing happened. Greatest comeback in political history.
Only Grover Cleveland was the only other president. Wasn't a 2-term president.
A lot of smack about the intelligence or lack thereof with the voting public. And so when he pulled off the upset with Hillary, I mean, I was like so proud of everybody because it was kind of like, it's like, God, you guys are getting it. They just put up these corporate puppets up there, controlled opposition.
He used his own money.
Yeah.
In 2015, 2016.
Yeah.
And here's the really good part.
Yeah.
She
donates his salary.
She outspent him 10-1.
Yeah.
10-1.
Oh, I know.
And all of her acolytes and all the media told her that she was going to win on a walk.
Well, what about when these pun intended trumped up charges started coming down? That he's got 91 felonies against him or something like that, and they start falling off. And now this last one, the half $500 million penalty. But it's kind of like his popularity increased as we know every charge that came up.
Well, they tried to throw him in prison.
Yeah.
They tried to assassinate him twice. And worse than that, they tried to bankrupt him too.
Talk about weaponizing the government. It's just like, of course, it seems like once Clinton's impeachment, started, well, they, of course, were going to impeach Nixon, but he wanted to avoid that. He didn't want that blemish on his record, right? So that's why he resigned. So
Correct.
Clinton was truly, kind of like our first little dance with a president being impeached, right?
Well, since Andrew Johnson and
But I mean, in our lifetime.
Oh yeah. No one had ever been impeached in the 20th century.
And now it's just like the dude was in office for weeks, and then you're impeaching him, and it's just like over and over and over. And so
they impeached. They did try to impeach him after he was out of office.
Yeah, exactly. And any kind of, I guess, halfway critically thinking person. And again, my advantage was, it was like watching like a Hunger Games episode, and I'm just watching the storyline of what they're doing to this dude. And I'm like, oh, they don't like him. They do not like him. And then this last time, when they tried to shoot him, like anybody that has seen any kind of story, they're never trying to kill the bad guy. They're always trying to get rid of the good guy.
Right.
That's and so anyway, it is quite a story, that this guy has gone through, and I think
Well,
the thing
he's
that
only
also
survived
he doesn't need this.
2 millimeters.
Yeah. Oh,
2 millimeters.
it's crazy.
And
Yeah.
people don't even remember the fact that one of his bystanders was killed and 2 others were seriously injured.
Yeah.
But you never notice the media never mentions their name at all, ever. These are victims.
Do you trust the government?
As far as I can throw them.
I love it. Hey, well, we're almost going into an hour and a half, Ricky. So why don't you wrap up your thoughts on the benefits and stuff like that, and then we're gonna see everybody next week again.
All right, sounds great. Listen, for the listeners out there, I just want you to know that anytime that we get information that is relevant and helpful to our veterans out there, we're gonna put that on the air and pass it out to our listeners out there so they know what's going on, because the government is great at programs, but they don't ever want anybody to know, so they don't ever have to shell out the money. They will reluctantly if dot the I's and cross the T's and do everything. And if you don't do it exactly the way the government wants, it gets rejected. And they're hoping that you just give up.
And it's va.org, or I'm sorry, va.gov. And the veterans can keep track of all these different things, policies and stuff like that, right? So that's the best spot, would you say?
Yeah, that's an easy way to track it.
I love
it. All right, we'll be back next time.
Hey, thanks a lot, Ricky. This was a lot of fun.